We are at the National Quartet Convention. I'm here with the members of the Mark Trammell Quartet. Standing next to me, Mark Trammell. And Mark, welcome to Gospel Music Today.
Thank you, man. It's a joy to be with you.
I'm going to ask you to introduce the rest of the group.
All right, standing next to me is Dustin Sweatman, our lead singer, piano player. Next to him is Joel Wood, our tenor singer. And the guy that caused us to change the name of our group back in February is at the end. He's our new bass singer, and his name is Pat Barker.
Okay, an important guy.
Very important guy, yes he is. Don't tell him that, though. He doesn't know we get paid for doing this.
Okay.
So don't let the cat out of the bag.
All right. Okay. Let me we want to get a little bit about your background in Southern gospel singing for people who are new to this.
Okay. Well, for me personally, I had the privilege of starting out this journey in the full-time realm with a group called the Kingsmen Quartet back in the late 70s. And then all of the 80s into 1990, I was with the Cathedral Quartet. And in end of 1990, Gerald Wolfe and I started a group called Greater Vision. And they're celebrating their 20th anniversary this year. And of course, Rodney and Chris, oddly enough, Chris has come back to that group, and he was the first tenor that we had. And so I spent 3 years there before moving back to the South, and spent almost 9 years with the Gold City Quartet. And then, in fact, while I was with the Greater Vision, I surrendered to the area of evangelism in my life, and it got to the point to where I needed to be more actively involved in evangelism. And in order for me to be able to do that, we had to have our own ministry. So I left Gold City to do this 8 years ago, and we had a trio for 7.5 of those 8 years. And Pat's been with us since late February, and we're just thrilled to death that he's here.
How did you get involved in Southern gospel singing?
Well, I was, I guess you could say I was born into it. My father was in a quartet most of my childhood. And then when I was around 12 years old, we had a family group. We started, and I did that for a long time. But I've been doing it since I can remember.
How did you get connected with the Mark Trammell Quartet?
When Eric Phillips left as tenor, Mark put out a mass email, and I saw it on Singing News, and I did what he asked. He asked that send in demo and a bio, and I sent it in, and he said he would call after Father's Day, and Monday morning I got a phone call, and the rest was history, and here I am.
When did you know that Southern gospel was where you were headed?
Really, just a few years ago, to be honest with you. I'm 37. I look 20. I understand your confusion. But really, it was just a few years ago the Dixie Echoes called, and I'd been friends with them for years. We had talked about that. And I'd always been very content with being in church, doing church music, having another job in another field, photography. And I just felt very impressed. I'd always loved the music, but I'd never really had that desire to travel. But when they called, the Lord just really put it on me very strongly that this is something I needed to do. I needed to get out there and try to reach the masses with a very big message that we serve a big God. We serve a great God who loves us dearly. And I love being in church work, but you reach 200-300 people, depending on how big the church is. This way I'm able to meet literally thousands of people, and to do it with these guys, it's really been an honor. So really this has been 3 years in the making, and God's been very, very good.
That's excellent. Thanks, Pat.
Thank you. God bless.
You've been with some of the best groups, some of the best singers. I mean, you go right with you now, got 3 of the best singers going. But there's more to it than that, isn't it? To get a quartet on the road than finding 4 great singers?
Much more to it. In fact, some of the greatest groups, we're celebrating 100 years of this being a standalone industry from a quartet standpoint. And down through those 100 years, there have been a lot of great singers come along. But some of the greatest chemistries that have been put together have been singers that were maybe not the greatest by themselves, but were good at blending, which meant they had to be good at teamwork.
Yeah.
And I am still convinced, after all these years of studying what they did back in the early days in the formation of this industry in its infancy, the thing that they focused on was the teamwork, was being able to blend, listen to each other when you sing. Sometimes that craft is not readily seen in some of the things that we hear this day and time, unfortunately. But there are many of those who are still doing this that pay attention to developing their craft, continuing to develop the craft that God has given them. Those guys are the guys that I'm proud of, because I'm in no man's land. I was taught from the guys of the old school, and the old school, most of those folks are now gone on to glory. But that's where my training came from. And I'm one of those logic people. If it just really makes sense, why mess it up? And that makes sense to our industry and to the people that listen to our music. It just makes sense to continue doing what was working for all those many years.
That's great. Now tell me about that new CD.
The new CD is called Testimony, and one of those old school producers is the guy that I got involved in producing this first major quartet project for us. His name is Larry Goss, and he is synonymous with great music, music that will tug at the heart. He takes arrangements, songs, arrangements from a musical standpoint, and he'll wrap it around a lyric, and he'll make that lyric come alive. And if we don't have a message, we might as well be singing country music or pop or whatever. But he looks at the message in the song before he actually sits down to analyze, okay, what are we going to do with this from a production standpoint? And he's one of the most brilliant people I've ever known when it comes to that. And I was thrilled to death that he would consent to do our first quartet project. And I'm very proud of these young men. They worked very hard at giving the best that we could give at this point, at this season in this ministry.
Well, it hasn't been out. This is, we're at the Quartet Convention, of course. It hasn't been out that long. I've heard so many good things about it.
Well, I just thank the Lord for that, because we wanted it to be effective. If it's never number one, I want it to be effective in touching people's lives. And if it's doing that, then we've been successful.
Okay. Mark and all the Mark Trammell Quartet, thank you very much for talking to us.
Our pleasure.
On Gospel
Thank
Music
you.
Today. There's more coming up on Gospel Music Today.